Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. And this time I'm reviewing the Doctor Who episode Asylum of the Daleks. It's been a really long time since we got ourselves some Doctor Who, but coming back, the show has not missed a beat. It is as wonderful as ever. We get loads and loads of cool stuff this episode. So let's get right down into it. Boy, folks, I mean, what a real continuity cavalcade here. I'm not gonna. Now, I've been a fan of Doctor Who for literally about half of my life. Actually, just slightly over. Started watching it on PBS back when I was in high school. Old Tom Baker era stuff. Really nice things. And, I think I know my Daleks pretty well, but even I couldn't keep track of just all the different varieties of Daleks that we saw popping up in this episode. I know that there are guides that are being created or have been created by the really hardcore encyclopedic knowledge of the show Doctor Who fans. I've seen a little bit of that, and wow, it really is just mind blowing. This is an episode that is not just a treat for fans, but really just a real love letter to the Daleks in general. Now, me being from the States, Doctor Who, while it certainly has quite a few fans there, it's not really a part of our cultural identity the way it is over in the UK. In fact, just today I was reading about this episode. Someone mentioned that like 9 out of 10 children in the UK know what a Dalek is, and that British people generally consider hiding behind the couch when the Daleks show up to be a real touchstone of modern British culture. Now, I'm sure not every British person is going to feel that way, but I got to admit, every British person that I've ever talked to and have brought this up has been familiar with Doctor Who and seems to be a fan. So, admittedly an unscientific survey, but make of that what you will. But anyway, let's get right down into it. Got a lot of stuff in this episode. Let's talk about, well, since we're talking about them, let's talk about the Daleks themselves. In this thing, let's try making sense. Right at the very start, we are introduced to the Parliament of the Daleks. The way the Doctor says it sort of hints heavily that he is familiar with them. So now we have a constitutional monarchy Dalek faction. From when they had the Dalek Emperor, we had an Imperial Dalek faction. Well, no, there was the Imperial Dalek faction was the guys who followed Davros, but okay, you get what I mean. There was the Dalek Emperor. There was the Daleks who followed Davros. There was the cult of Skaro. So Imperial, constitutional monarchy, empire, cult. Yeah, the Daleks do, if nothing else, embrace a diverse form of governance. On the surface, really underneath it all, the Daleks are basically just fascists. And I do mean fascist in the actual political science definition of what makes something a fascistic government, not just a buzzword thrown around by somebody protesting whatever. Okay, folks, if you're gonna throw around words, at least know what they mean. In real life, as I have mentioned in my other reviews, I'm a teacher, so unsurprisingly, that sort of thing really, really bugs the hell out of me. Especially since while I spend most of my time teaching English, a lot of my training actually does also fall into social studies. So again, that's something that just really gets under my skin when people use those terms incorrectly. But anyway, and I do have to point out, did you notice that they even referred to the lead Dalek as the Prime Minister? I was sitting there watching, I was like, my God, this really, really is such a British show. And I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form as a criticism. Okay, the British style humor, the storytelling, that is part of certainly the appeal of Doctor Who to me as an American. I enjoy British humor. I like British TV shows and movies because they're familiar. They're different enough. They're familiar enough that I can really understand them, but they're different enough to be interesting. Actually, that's the same way I feel about Canadian TV, but whatever. I'm getting off track here. So we're also introduced to Well, we have seen the Daleks, sort of Daleks using humans as raw material for making other Daleks, and that's a real serious crux of what's going on in this episode. Now, remember, the Daleks were come from a race called the Khalids. They were not human. I mean, Davros is pretty much, as far as I know, the only time we've actually seen an actual Khalid. Wait, I might have to take that back. I'm sure we saw some more of them on some old episodes that had Sarah Jane. You know what? It has been way too long since I've seen those episodes, so I'm going to have to back off my previous statement there. Anyway, but we have seen instances of the Daleks in the past taking humans as raw materials and turning them into Daleks. Now, the whole thing with little eye stalks popping out of the forehead and laser biddies in the palm, that's a new trick. But they didn't exactly have CGI like this back in the old days in the 70s, so it only makes sense. But I do like how there are that is definitely a big callback to what we have seen in previous Dalek history. For example, the Doctor talks about how they're erasing love and replacing it with hate. Well, I'm actually disappointed that he didn't use this exact term, but that's basically what they're talking about when they talked about the Dalek factor in, I believe it was Evil of the Daleks? I might be wrong on that. Again, I'm not the greatest Doctor Who historian in the world, and let's face it, the Daleks have a history dating back to the time when my dad was in elementary school. So, anyway, I did like that. And another thing I liked about the way that this new way of transforming people into Daleks was introduced is it actually reminded me of something from the old X-Men comics from the 90s. Now, I'll give you this really quick. Is basically, if you're familiar with X-Men, one of the X-Men's major enemies are Sentinels, who are giant robots whose whole job is to hunt down and exterminate mutants. Well, in the 90s, writer Scott Lobdell, a rather controversial writer of X-Men tales, but we'll leave that aside, helped introduce these new type of Sentinel called the Prime Sentinel, and they were basically humans who, through a combination of cybernetic surgery and nanites, had been converted essentially into Sentinels. They could fly, they could shoot lasers out of their hands, they could detect mutants, and they spoke with the crazy robotic Sentinel voice and all that other fun stuff. And I loved this idea. The idea that any person just walking past you on the street, if you were a mutant, suddenly turning out to be a Sentinel and coming after you trying to kill you, I thought that was wonderful. I thought it introduced a fantastic sense of paranoia into the X-Men universe. But tragically, beyond the Operation Zero Tolerance crossover, the Prime Sentinels never really went anywhere after that at Marvel. I think there's been a few times that they were mentioned or the idea behind them was dabbled with again, but for the most part, they've really kind of ended up on the scrap heap of X-Men history, which I always thought was a tremendous disappointment. But bringing it back to Doctor Who, well, if what we're seeing here isn't just a one-off, suddenly it raises the possibility that anybody could be a Dalek. I mean, think about this. We don't know that the whole Dalek conversion thing stopped just because Amy and the Doctor left the planet, or because the Doctor slapped his little bracelet on Amy. I mean, did they even say anywhere? Oh well, as soon as we blow up the Asylum, the nanites are all going to switch off. Now, I'm sure the Doctor is aware of what's going to happen here. I mean, he understands what these things are, but I can't help but wonder. I mean, wouldn't that be an interesting take if somewhere down the line the Doctor realized he was wrong and that slowly but surely he himself, the Dalek's greatest enemy, was becoming a Dalek. Ooh, isn't that just delicious? Okay, I can see myself in my camera, so I really need to stop making those faces because I look really yeah. But anyway, I'll leave that to future episodes and fan fiction writers out there. But getting back to what I was saying about the Daleks using humans as raw material. I know one things I've seen fans talking about this episode a little bit is some people were kind of upset by this idea because they thought it would go against the ideas of how the Daleks are convinced that Daleks are the only race worthy in the galaxy and everybody else should be exterminated or enslaved until they're no longer useful. Dalek Sec was brought up a few times. Okay, if you're going along those lines of thinking, I'm sorry, but I think you've kind of missed some of the point. It's as I've said, Daleks do come from a species called the Calids, but it is established that they do consider humans as acceptable raw material for making new Daleks. Remember again, we are raw material. So in that way, Daleks being biased against humans is like us being biased against a piece of iron. That is all we are to the Daleks. It is only until everything that makes us human has been removed, has been overwritten by the Dalek factor, and that we become the beings only really capable of the emotion of hate that they are truly a Dalek. And once that's happened, then where the raw material came from doesn't matter. At least that's the way I understand the Dalek's perspective. The problem with Dalek Sec, from Daleks in New York and Evolution of the Daleks, is he was not just a raw human criminal who was taken as raw material and turned into a Dalek. He was an actual human Dalek hybrid. He was advocating that the Daleks change, that the Daleks incorporate genuine aspects of humanity into themselves. And that is why the Daleks got so freaked out and turned on him. And of course, the choice to hybridize with a random human who was really just a petty criminal, not exactly the wisest of choice, I have to think. If it had been some really incredibly brilliant scientist, someone like along the lines of perhaps Davros, then, well, the Daleks probably wouldn't have been terribly keen on the idea anyway, but at least they would have had one less reason to object to the situation. But, oh boy. As much as I love the David Tennant era, I really try not to think back to Daleks in New York and Evolution of the Daleks, because there's just so much stuff in those episodes that was just stupid. Because apparently the Doctor can die from all kinds of forms of poison and radiation, but is mystically immune to lightning. And, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure the American accents that we heard in that episode were the British folks' way of paying us back for Dick Van Dyke's Cockney accent in Mary Poppins. If that's the case, I have to call that disappropriate retribution. But anyway, we want to focus on the positive. We want to focus on the positive around here. Let's talk about the character. Oh yeah, I have to say I did get a humongous kick out of actually getting to see what Skaro is like, and having there be this big, humongous Dalek-shaped statue building, whatever the hell that was at the very beginning. That was awesome. That was awesome. Not the greatest CGI in the world, but one does have to remember that the BBC is essentially a gigantic British version of PBS in America. Government funding, folks. But anyway, the Doctor. I mean, Matt Smith's doing a great job. I definitely enjoyed, as cheesy as it was, the way that 11 was incorporated into what was going on there. And you can tell he's still having a blast being the Doctor. And his reaction to having his greatest enemies come at him like this. I mean, it's just phenomenal. It was Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor, in absolutely excellent form. I really have no complaints that I can make about what I see here. This is really just Matt Smith doing everything that I really want him to do as the 11th Doctor, and clearly having a grand old time doing it. Now, Yeah, let's wrap up the experience, the known characters before we move on to our new character of Oswin. Now we have Rory and Amy. Now, to be upfront with you guys, I haven't gotten around to watching the whole pond life thing. I meant to do it this weekend. It's just I got busy doing other stuff. So I will check that out eventually. So whatever is going on in that, I'm not up on it. So I can only talk about what's going on with Amy and Rory in regards to this episode. Uh, as much as I like Amy, she's a character I've always had some sort of mixed feelings about. I do like that she's in many ways very different than a lot of the previous companions. In fact, in terms of emotional baggage, I think she actually tops out Ace in terms of what she came into the TARDIS with. But I think this episode takes a moment to really seriously address what I think is one of the major criticisms that I and a lot of other fans have about Amy. And however you may feel in regards to this, I think it is something that does need to be addressed. And that's the whole point of this episode, where Rory says to Amy, "I love you more than you love me." And given that Rory has literally been in love with Amy since the earliest days of his childhood, and has been in love with her for over 2,000 years. And remember, the Doctor even told Rory, like, "Okay, Rory, Amy will be fine in the Pandorica. Just get in the TARDIS. We'll go get her in the future. This will just take a minute." Rory chose to stay conscious for 2,000 years just because the Doctor told him there was Amy would be slightly safer if he did that. Maybe I missed it somewhere, but I sure would like to know if the Doctor ever said to Rory, "So, Rory, didn't there in the 2,000 years that you were hanging around this cube, did anything happen that needed your intervention to make sure that Amy would be all right?" And I'm guessing that the answer to that was like, "No, everything was pretty chill these last 2,000 years." Rory must have felt like a real chump. But anyway, getting back to that, I have to say that is somewhat of a fair criticism. Now, not to say that I don't think that Amy doesn't love Rory. Now, when we were first introduced to her, I kind of got the feeling that she was just marrying Rory because she felt that she had to, that she didn't really have any better prospects. And given how attacking her psychiatrist was a significant part of Amy's childhood, that might not actually be that far off. But again, I just didn't really feel like Amy had that very strong connection to Rory. That marrying him was something that she really genuinely in her heart of hearts wanted to do. Now, over time, of course, that changed. And us seeing that happen was part of some really great storytelling, some really nice characterization for both Rory and Amy. So by the time it rolled around that they did get married, I was totally on board with it. I felt like these were two people who were genuinely very in love with each other, and that getting married was the natural and best culmination of all of that. But here, when we see Amy and Rory now, literally on the brink of a divorce, it's really hard not to feel that Rory would feel this way. I mean, again, look at everything that he has done for Amy. And then for her to kind of, basically have things go this way. Now, again, I haven't seen the whole pawn life thing, so I don't think it would be fair for me to completely put the blame on Amy, what's going on here. In divorces, there's usually plenty of blame to go around. So again, I'm going to have to plead ignorance to some degree on this one. But let's move on to the real crux of what's happening here. And that is that Amy is not being honest with Rory. She is hiding things from him. And she is lying to him. Now, again, granted, Amy is doing this for what she thinks is a good reason. She thinks that because of Rory's desire for more children and her inability to give him those children, that Rory would be happier with someone else. And okay, I can understand how Amy's fears and her sense of loss at finding out she can't have any more kids could really play on her mind to make that mistake. But, and here's the problem that I think a lot of people are having with this situation is Amy's mistake being understandable does not mean it is not a mistake, that it is not a moral, that she did not do something that was morally wrong. I mean, one of the general facts of life is that you should not lie to people you love. You should be honest with them. Because if you truly love someone, then you owe it to them to be honest with them. Now, I'm not going to say there are never exceptions to this situation. Life is complicated, and there are almost always exceptions to anything. But, and here's the real meat of what I'm trying to get at here. If after everything that they have been through together, if after waiting for her for over 2,000 years, Amy really thinks that this is going to be the deal breaker for Rory, then I can't help but ask if she even at this point really knows who he is, or if she even at this point, after all of this, still really understands what kind of a person he is. Now, granted, if she was to tell him the truth, yeah, I'm sure Rory would be extraordinarily disappointed. He'd probably feel heartbroken. But after everything that he has done for Amy, after spending 2,000 years just on the chance that maybe she would be a little bit safer because of him doing this, does she really think he's going to walk away because of this? That he's just going to throw up his hands and say, oh, well, sorry, guess I'm going to go have to get a Match.com account or something. Come on, Amy. You really think Rory's going to do that to you after all that? And here's my other major problem with the situation. And I don't really know if I can fully level this at Amy as a character, or if this is really something I should be more blaming on Stephen Moffat's story here. But Amy, you have, as not as literally a member of your family and your very good friend, a centuries-old alien with a time machine that can travel anywhere in space and time, and who has extensive knowledge of just about every science under the sun, under the 400 billion suns that make up the Milky Way. Before you go throwing away your marriage, why don't you go and privately confide about this situation to a fella who calls himself the Doctor? Doctor! It is just possible that the super advanced alien with the time machine and knowledge of all these countless alien civilizations all across space and time might be able to find a way to solve your fertility problems. Now, yes, this isn't your standard basic small natural problem with biology. This is something that was done to her by the people at Demon's Run, so it might be a slightly tougher nut to crack. But Amy, as far as we know, didn't even attempt to try and find a solution this way. And that just makes her look like the biggest idiot who was ever born. Again, I can forgive characters for making mistakes that are emotionally understandable. But when we see mistakes that can only be described as they lost all but 3 of their brain cells, okay, no, that's bullshit. Okay, oh, gotta stop with the faces. Gotta stop with the faces. I'm not Jim Carrey. I can't get away with doing that. Yep, just water. Although at this point I kind of wish there's something a little stronger in there. Okay, so let me see here. I'm just checking my notes real quick. Yes, one thing that I did forget to mention earlier about the Dalek nano thing. I love that the Doctor one time referred to them as micro machines. If you're not familiar with them, micro machines were these really awesome, like little tiny toy cars. They were really big in the late 80s and early 90s. If you've seen Home Alone, when the burglars slip on the little cars at the bottom of the staircase, okay, those are micro machines. They were awesome. So let's move on to the character of Oswin, played by Jenna Louise Coleman, someone who's kind of important this season. I don't want to. I guess I should say before I go on, I'm not going to say. I'm going to try and not say anything that's going to be really spoiler wise for the rest of the season. Because one, I don't honestly know very much about we're going to be seeing later this season. I generally make it a point to avoid anything that resembles major spoilers. So anything I have to say about Oswin, I'm going to try and keep confined to what we just see in this episode. First of all, once we get to see exactly what Oswin's situation is, I was really jazzed here. Because basically, what it looked like at the start was the Omega Man with Daleks. Only we have, Jenna Louise Coleman instead of Robert. Oh, crap. I am complete. Charlton Heston. Yes, Charlton Heston. That's who was in the Omega Man. I'm sure of it. But anyway, which incidentally is a really good movie. And I'm talking about like the actual version from the 70s, not that Will Smith stuff. Okay, no offense to Will Smith. I love the guy, but yeah, that movie was bull. But anyway, so the idea of, okay, this woman who's kind of had this whole Omega Man thing going on with Daleks for a whole year. Okay, this sounds like a really cool character. This sounds like somebody who really can add some cool stuff to the series. Of course, it turns out that's not what's going on. And of course, when we first see the Doctor saying like, "Where do you get the milk? Where do you get the eggs?" We think he's just being, a smartass. But he keeps bringing that up. And one thing that I noticed, and I haven't seen anybody else mention this in the forums that I've checked out about talking about this episode, is do you notice that Oswin is nailing bits of wood to the doors that are supposedly keeping the Daleks out? Okay, first of all, I'm no Bob Vila. I'm actually really bad at anything in terms of home repair. I've never been able to do anything more complicated than replace my toilet seat. But that said, even I know that you can't normally nail wood to metal. Okay, metal is generally a rather dense thing. And even then, what in the world good is wood going to do against the Daleks? I mean, how was she getting that on there? That was one thing I kept wondering every time I saw that throughout the episode. And of course, the answer is, well, that's really not there at all. The wood is no more real than the souffles. And I'll give Stephen Moffat credit. That was a really brilliant turn. I did not see that coming. I didn't figure out what was going on until literally just a few seconds before it was shown on the screen. And again, it's just an absolutely brilliant idea. A really, really different take on what we've seen before with the Daleks converting humans into Daleks. So yeah, I love it. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I just absolutely love it. As I've said before, when shows genuinely surprise me with what it is they're doing. So, and again, seeing this human element inside of Daleks, it even reminds me of the Christopher Eccleston episode where we see fear. We see the Dalek that is afraid. And again, all of this is just really cool because primarily, as I've said, the only emotion we ever seem to have the Daleks show is hate, or just sputtering, irrational anger like a toddler throwing a fit. So, some real credit to Stephen Moffat for finding a way to introduce such humanity into a story with the Daleks and into a Dalek. It's some great writing. Now, let me see here. Oh man, there was something else I wanted to talk about, and I'm completely blanking on what it was. Ah, yes, I remember now. I want to go back for a moment to talk about the idea that Daleks see humans as raw material. Now, have you noticed that in this episode we're introduced to the idea that the Daleks call the Doctor the Predator? And it even touches upon the idea that the Daleks have also called the Doctor the Oncoming Storm. So look at the names they have for him: Predator and the Oncoming Storm. A dangerous animal and a natural disaster. Now, as I said, the Daleks view humans as nothing more than raw materials, or animals, or pests, dangerous animals to be exterminated. To the Dim, even their greatest enemy, even the Doctor, is really nothing more than a dangerous animal, a natural disaster. Even as much as the Daleks fear him, and we've seen the Doctor scares the living hell out of the Daleks, they can't fully bring themselves to put the Doctor on the same level as sentient being that they hold themselves on, even after everything that he's done. And that just shows the incredible narrow-mindedness, tunnel vision, and flat-out arrogance that is inherent, that is the nature of the Daleks, that is the Dalek factor. And that inability to care about anything besides themselves, to view anything other than themselves as worthy of life, that really is the Dalek's greatest weakness. And of course the Doctor holds the exact opposite philosophy, and that's his greatest strength. And that's why the Doctor is always able to triumph over the Daleks in the end. Because even though he's an alien, even though he's a Gallifreyan, a Time Lord, the Doctor is often more human than the humans around him. Of course, this isn't always the case. If you look back at the very first episode of Doctor Who, or I'm sorry, the very first episodes, you see that there's actually a point where the Doctor considered killing a human, killing a caveman, in order to basically save his own skin. And it was Ian Chesterton who called him out on this. Now, another fan has really observed that this really might be the moment where the Doctor realizes that humans are special. That if a human can act in a morally superior way to a Time Lord, then we are a species worthy of his help, of his admiration, and his friendship. Now, that's a very big argument to make, but I think it's one that's worth putting out there. Because, well, we're coming up next year on the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, and rumors have been going around that some big stuff involving, the true nature of the Doctor is going to be coming down the pipe. And if that's the case, then whatever we see, whatever happens, whatever we learn about the Doctor, you can bet that his connection with humanity, and I'm not talking about the whole American TV movie connection to humanity. If you probably know what I'm talking about if you're watching Doctor Who. Whatever it is, that is undoubtedly going to be at the center of it. Because, in a way, that's kind of one of the main things about about Doctor Who, is that he is there to observe and comment on the human race, on the human condition. And while the Doctor's judgment is not always positive of humans, more often than not, we show ourselves to be worthy of the Doctor's praise, of the Doctor's protection, and his friendship. And I think that's part of the reason why the Doctor looks after Earth so much. And not just that, but because I think on some level, I think even he realizes that even he can learn something from us. So folks, with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.